3, 2, and 1.
Nico. This is Easy Awakenings Podcast, the Insanity Survival Guide, Episode 2, all about you, baby.
Ooh, damn.
Ooh, yeah. All right, let's get going.
My loins.
His loins are on fire. So yeah, this episode is all about what makes you you. And yeah, like
What a question.
What?
I mean, it's very complicated, isn't it?
It is. It sounds
Yeah.
like something for quantum physics.
I mean, we definitely make it complicated for sure.
Yeah, we seem to. And I guess that's kind of what this is all about, is how not to turn that big mess of a mind, or your thoughts anyways, into, this convoluted sort of ideology about what you actually are, and kind of getting into the core of what you actually are.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want it to make it sound too mystical or anything, but we want to demystify for sure. But don't people kind of like the crazies a little bit?
Some people kind of like the crazy stuff.
Yeah, I
sometimes.
know. I mean, think about it. I mean, all the bad boys, they got the girls, I mean, if you think about it. I mean, a good amount of them. But what does that say about us? It's like, it's actually that part of us is actually kind of likes to pull that part of somebody else, I think, sometimes.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's a very addictive part of to misery that I think kind of goes unrecognized, and it's why we kind of always get ourselves into sort of crappy situations over and over. It's one thing to hit a situation
Trouble.
that's crazy.
It's trouble.
You are spiking the.
I'm sorry, y'all.
He was making out with the microphone. Anyways, all right.
La, 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 la.
Down to business.
Yeah.
Down to business.
Yeah, what makes you you? Well, there's your name, right? I'm reading it off the cue card thing here, or the PowerPoint. There's where you're from, where you work, and, of course, what you look like. Were you one of those bad boys? But is this who you really are? What do you think? What do you say, Marquise?
That's a good question. And absolutely not. I mean, we want to ask you this simple question so that you can verify this for yourself. If you removed all of this, if you removed your name, where you're from, where you work, and, of course, what you look like, would you still be you? The answer?
Who would you be?
No, would you? Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of fucking scary a little bit.
One thing I can guarantee you is you, of course, would still be you. Now, some people might answer differently, but they're not talking about you. They're talking about your identity. And there's a massive difference.
Yeah, you might be able to let go one of those things as not being you, but maybe all of it might be a little bit tough to let go. But definitely one or a few of those things make you think that that's who you are more than some other things, if that makes sense.
Oh, no,
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Well, because there are elements to our life that are very important to our experience. Absolutely. I mean, everything from your finances, your likes and dislikes, the way that you look. These are crucial to your experience. Now, some things, get more attention than others, in good ways and in bad.
Yeah, that's what I was actually just thinking.
No, that's true. But that doesn't mean that's who you are, and there's a really important element to understanding the difference between who you are and things about your life. There's a very big difference.
Yeah, and a really important question.
Yeah. So we want to ask again, who are you? What are you? And so the answer to that, consciousness. That's who you really are. That's who all of us are. I got to clear my throat.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it, but it's actually one of those things that the more you talk about it, that sometimes the further away from it you actually get.
Yeah. Well, because it's something that when you start to pigeonhole what that essence of your consciousness, or the consciousness itself. The word itself sort of can be divisive. Like, what is consciousness? What does that really mean? But and I guess in the way that we're using it, consciousness is that core essence or awareness that makes life possible. And it sort of is embedded in all life and all existence. So every atom has consciousness. Every molecule has some sort of rudimentary consciousness. Anything with volition, and that's all of life, has consciousness to it. So you are that observer that gives rise to all other existence. So
yeah, and you get closer to it when you are able to observe with actually not judging what you're looking at, and that actually in itself gets you closer to who you are, because all those things that actually cause you stress kind of fall away, and you're actually able to just totally immerse yourself in whatever you're looking at. And it could be the beautiful mountains or a forest, but it doesn't actually need to be. It could be your children, it could be your best friend. I'm doing that right now. I'm looking at Marquise, and I'm in awe. Or it could be, just a cityscape or something like that. And you don't necessarily need to get lost in all of that by just simply observing it without any need to name it.
Yeah. I mean, that's without limiting what you really are with words. You are the essence beneath your physical form that is beyond identity. That's beyond grasping, and it's that which allows the world to be, quite simply.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
It was beautiful.
That was beautiful. That was beyond reproach.
So, I mean, a good question that sort of arises, when we're talking about this sort of thing, that it comes in a lot of people's minds. It's, well, why do I sometimes feel like I'm all those other things?
Yeah.
Get a headache, dude.
No, I just felt that question. I just felt it, like in my gut. Yeah.
It wasn't the Taco Bell.
No more TB.
No more TB.
But there's one word that encapsulates this question, and that is the
ego, my friend.
EGO,
the
BINGO.
Not the egos,
ego.
Not the waffles, but the ego.
Yeah.
The ego is the illusion that believes it's the real you.
Yeah, it's sort of like that. It's kind of that voice that wants you to be better than other people, and then also at the same time wants like your own destruction in a way. Yeah. I know it sounds weird, and I'm not trying to say that you're bipolar or anything, but yeah, we're all split in two at some point. Some of us are split into more than two, but that's all good.
Well, it sounds self-defeating. Because it is self-defeating.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
That's the funny thing about the
right?
ego.
Yeah.
You would not actually want to impede your actual progress or acquiring things that are beneficial to your life. Your ego, on the other hand, might do it quite often. There are people who relentlessly get in their own way. A lot of you might have, a coworker or a spouse or someone that you're very close to, a friend, who's constantly not just bringing in negative situations and circumstances, but constantly creating situations for themselves and all of the people around them that it's like hell. It's like living in hell with these folks. And these are people who are just ruled by their ego. They're drowning in ego. If ego was a horrible nightclub cologne, it would be that guy that's walking by.
That's hilarious, dude.
That dude walking by you,
that.
where everyone turns and holds their nose.
Oh, I know, man. Oh, dude.
So that's just a little taste of what the ego.
It starts with an A, but I'm not gonna say it because, you know why.
Might be children listening, but the ego it's the identity of all things, of all the external things in your life compiled into your personal experience and mistaking it for the core of your essence. That's what the ego is. It has an emotional component to it, which aids in its mission to dominate. But it's also important.
Yeah, it's the ego is not evil. It's something inside of you, but it's not the devil, y'all.
And I want to go into that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's not.
We
Yeah,
still have some good time. We're
Yeah,
trying
it's
to keep these podcasts. I'm sorry. We're
Yeah,
trying to keep these
that's
podcasts
good,
at
yeah.
about 20 minutes or so. So
Yeah.
we're still pretty good. What were we saying?
yeah, and well, it's not your enemy to be defeated either.
Yeah.
You know, because once you get into that mode where I have to kill this ego, you almost get to a point where you're actually doing yourself most of the harm.
Yeah, this was something. And I don't know about a lot of you guys, but this is something I went through a lot, especially during the beginning stages of me sort of waking up into like holy shit, there's an awesome way to live life. What you might call the start of your spiritual journey. It's that it's real easy to turn your ego into an enemy. And that's what Victor's talking about when this evil lurking thing in the shadows that's like, I gotta stop, I gotta defeat it.
Yeah, it's a boogeyman.
Yeah, you make it into a goal that has to be sort of tackled. And when you do that, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with setting a goal to sort of step outside of your ego, but when you make your ego into the opposition, you strengthen it the hell out of it. I mean, it becomes a very potent thing and then that's when it becomes self-destructive. That's when you start actually screwing up.
Yeah, then that's what it wants in a way. That's actually how it operates.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "I'm your friend." That person who cut you off or whatever, that person that didn't call you back, they're bad. Stay away from them. The only thing that they'll do is hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
But in actuality, no one could hurt you really but you.
Yeah. Emotionally, anyways. Physically speaking, that's of course a different circumstance. But
Yeah, definitely. We're not speaking physically, but right now.
Now, emotionally, and that's kind of a tough pill to swallow for a lot of folks. That when they hear things like, oh, you're the only one that can hurt yourself, emotionally speaking, they think, well, no, that's BS. If someone does something wrong, then they're hurting me. And of course, you can take extreme examples like doing like cheating you or cheating on you or something like that, where these are things that might be morally harmful. Not harmful. What's a good word? Morally defunct. It's morally screwed up.
Yeah.
That may be true. That what they're doing is unjust and bad. But it is important for you, if you really want to get a hold of your life and you really want to be the captain of your own ship, you have to understand that your emotions spawn from you. Your bad emotions are a reaction to the world around you and what you're seeing. Now, it's not saying we don't want to make an enemy out of our bad emotions either, because they're also something to learn from. But we do want to understand the truth of the matter. They come from us.
Yeah, and we're all responsible for it. And like you said, sometimes it is a tough pill to swallow, but ultimately we're responsible. And if we don't realize it, we actually end up giving our power away.
Exactly.
And that just keeps the cycle going, right?
Yep.
So you take 2 steps forward, you take 4 steps back, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's probably not the exact wording.
There's a song about that somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a cowboy song.
But I will guarantee you that is the most empowering thing. Once you get to that point of realization, that you go, wow, I'm responsible for it, but not in a way where I'm going to sit here and feel guilty. And I'm not necessarily going to need to judge other people for that, right? But you take your power back, right? You take it so that then you could use it to kind of internalize things and raise your own consciousness level.
I sort of that sort of segues into the next point that we wanted to bring up is, why is it important to know the difference between who you are and what your ego is? Because again, we're always, it seems like this constant battle to separate yourself from your ego. And that's the most important elements of this, is understanding that you are different, very different from your ego. The ego is, it had a purpose a long time ago, It's what I like to call a tool or an organ. It's like a pair of lungs. When inflated too much, it becomes dangerous and possibly deadly. But it's important to also remember that it kind of has its function. And more so in the past, that it had a function as a sort of protective mechanism, but because humans are in sort of this butterfly stage of life or evolution, we're sort of growing. We're at this sort of point where we're able to step outside of our egos, but then we still get trapped within our egos, and then we're starting to find out, well, where does our ego have a place in our life?
Yeah, I mean, think about this for a second. Okay, just visualize this. When you're at your darkest point, right? You think no one cares about you, and it really doesn't matter what got you there, but what part of you is actually there for you?
Yeah,
is your ego, in a way.
Yeah.
It can be your best friend in those times, especially when we don't really learn practical ways to cope with day-to-day living, how to cope with people, how to deal with other people's egos. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah.
And when you realize, though, also on that point is when other people have the same ego, you actually kind of feel better about it, right?
Yeah.
Because you realize other people are in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
They're suffering, they're out there, but damn, you're trying, man. You're, you know what I mean? You're doing your part to kind of bring the whole species forward.
Oh yeah, and that's why it's important to, again, don't fight your ego, let it do its thing. But the most important part of this is that you understand who you really are and where you need to go. Your goal is to elevate yourself to the highest point of consciousness you could possibly get to, and we're going to go into that, and that's through various forms of meditation, and which meditation can be anything from just using techniques to rise yourself to a sort of higher point of awareness, to this more stereotypical sitting down in a yoga room, chanting, and so on and so forth. But we'll get to that at a later point.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah,
so
no, not at all.
Yeah,
Not at all.
yeah. So I mean, sometimes we'll joke around, and we're not here to intentionally hurt anyone's feelings,
Yeah.
but it's mostly just to kind of lighten things up and not take things too seriously.
You gotta have some fun every now and again.
Yeah.
You get too serious, and it's
yeah. I mean, it keeps the long road feel like it's a short trip.
and we got to make these podcasts kind of fun. We can start to zonk out. We're doing a little too long.
Yeah.
But yeah, we want to. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, suffering spawns when the ego is in charge. That is something to remember. Remember, the ego has a place, but when it's in charge, that's when suffering starts to come in.
So
emotional suffering.
How do you know it's in charge?
How do you know it's in charge?
Yep, and other people have said this, right? So that voice either says you're better than or you're not as good as.
Yes, that is very, very true.
Thank you, E.T.
That's Eckhart Tolle, by the way. But so something else to remember. So the more resistance to the ego's shenanigans, the more suffering you endure. And again, like we said, I want to touch back on this. So there's a question: should I try to get rid of my ego? The answer to that's
no.
No.
Don't even try.
Don't even try. So you're much more difficult time doing that than just sort of letting it be.
Story time.
So we're moving on to the next segment of this podcast.
Yeah.
Story time. We're trying this out where we kind of go back into some experiences that we've had to sort of relate to you guys and let you know that we're humans, not a couple of robots.
Yeah. Well, you want to go first, Marquise?
Yeah, I'll go first. So this one happened not too long ago. I had sort of a really rough time at work. I work in an office, by the way, and there was a coworker who I was actually quite friendly with at one point, and there was a tough task at hand, and she was asking some things that seemed unreasonable, and we sort of went to management to sort of quell the issue, and she sort of snapped at me in the office, and that tripped my ego up. and she did it in a way that I felt quite belittled. So afterwards, and I'm a person, by the way, that likes to resolve issues and sort of get at it, get a hold of it. And sometimes I can be a little, I don't want to say forceful, but I can be a little, how do you say, I can be assertive, very assertive. And when my ego's in charge, I can be domineering. So I went into this girl's office and, I sort of confronted her, and I just let her know I didn't appreciate how she was doing what she did. And she snapped, and it just created this really uncomfortable situation. She started
yell at the top of her lungs, right?
Screaming at the top of her in an office setting. And I work in a particularly chaotic environment for the time being, but this was way over the top, and it really made for a very, very uncomfortable situation since that time. And I still deal with uncomfort to this day, but I hit this point, and by the way, she started lying about things. She started coming up with just complete falsehoods about me and what had happened and things like that.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe she was trying to protect her own identity.
It was very much,
or reestablish some dominant position.
It was sort of a point of insecurity. If you're finding, I don't want to call it a bobcat or something in the bushes. It's freaking out and it's gonna lash out in any way that it can, and that's very much how that went. And it really left me in a place where I felt horrible. For one, because I don't like other people and I don't like to be in bad standing with other people. I don't like being in a quarrel with other people. I don't like confrontation. It's not comfortable. I don't like the negative energy, and so I couldn't really resolve the issue because the girl was very much just completely closed off to resolution. And by this point, she had just said some things that were just so horrible that it would have been kind of a bad place for me to go back to her and sort of find that resolution in terms of communication directly with her. So in that position, I was just sort of forced to just kind of back off, and I had to remind myself that in a situation where I don't have complete control over the circumstance, I always have a choice within myself. And so I had to surrender to the situation. And by surrender, that doesn't mean just resign and say, oh, well, you're right, I'm wrong, just to make things, smooth over. No, this was about surrendering to the truth of the situation. This is what it was. This is how she was behaving, and I was not about to change her. I don't want to begin to try to change her and her mindset, especially with people that are that unstable and unbalanced. Do not try to change them. Don't add force to that situation. You add force when you have to, but adding force in a situation like this would just turn a fire into a bigger explosion, and it already exploded. So, but once I hit that point where I just surrendered, and I said, you know what, that's what it is, and I'm going to do what I can to resolve the situation and move myself out of the circumstance. That has actually become my choice, is to move out of that situation. The entire job, mind you. But it actually, I felt great. And then oddly enough, things started rolling in. I started getting offers at different places. And then all of a sudden now I'm looking at different interviews, and then, I don't even deal with her anymore. And it's become good. And that's something that, whether or not you believe that, there's some sort of divine intervention that comes in, or simply because your attitude has opened up opportunities, when you get into that mode and that's a mode of enlightenment where you're not resisting life, you're not fueling your ego by, fighting against it or someone else's ego, change starts to happen, period. So that's my story.
Yeah, use the technique. Don't muscle anything.
Yeah, do not. You gotta take a step back, take a deep look inside, and meditate the hell out of yourself. Get to a point where you really just take a deep look at yourself and your ego, and you really got to take an honest look at is my ego in charge? Is it doing things to exacerbate the issue? If so, back away, take a look at it, and acknowledge that it's there. Don't fight it, but acknowledge that it's there. And then ask yourself, how do I start to do things differently?
Yeah, thanks, Marquise. So, yeah, I mean, my story comes at a time at work. I don't work in an office setting, but it's more like people on their feet all day. So you're not only just mentally tired, but you're physically tired as well. So that can compound on things. But essentially, it was the end of the workday. This guy comes up to me. He's got some manager position. He's got some kind of power over me. So says that I'm not on my game, which I think he was just deflecting on this one. But essentially, he tried to tell me actually to do something that was actually against the rules, because his boss actually told him that he has to follow a certain rule where the business can't close until all the customers leave. Okay. But this person has some physical issues. Their back hurts, their knee hurts, things like that. So I think that's actually what brought a lot of that aggressiveness on their side. So me, one of my actually good habits, but also my bad habits, is I kind of follow up and I want to resolve the issue right away. So I kind of go in there and try to pick at the scab a little.
Sure, so lots of us can relate to that.
Yeah. And I went there and I said, hey, what's up? You didn't have to react that way, because he was being kind of aggressive and, was in a pissy mood. And I really
being a dick.
I'm glad you said it. But he said, okay, you want to talk about this now? I said, yeah, I want to talk about it now. I was like, what was your problem? And, he's saying, yeah, I went up to you and, I was trying to get you motivated, but I was in a very difficult position. I was there with very little help. And instead of him helping me at that time, he was actually only kind of poking at me and making fun at me. But at this point, I explained that to him, but he did not want to accept that. So essentially, to make this long story short, it really, in essence, he was questioning my work ethic, and that really brought out my ego. So, but not in a way where I was screaming at him or yelling. But it allowed me, I took some time to myself and I basically kind of watched him, and at some point just realized he's only going to have his own view, and that's the only way he's going to see it. And at that point, I was really looking forward to just leaving and going home. But I was pissed off still. So I think he was surprised that I didn't want to keep talking, but I just walked out of there, and the whole crew walked out together, said bye, all that stuff, walked away, and I was like, asshole. Not to him directly, but just to myself, but I had to say it out loud. But it brought out in me a lot of emotional pain, which, followed me. It was a literal gut check, and I hate when people say literal anyway, so. But it followed me. I went home, I, made a meal, and it was there right in my gut. Just that, and everyone's had this experience, but this gut nasty feeling, it makes it difficult to eat food. It could be like your girlfriend broke up with you, one of those type situations. And I was so surprised that had come out of me, because I actually hadn't had that feeling in such a long time, and I was very surprised, and it followed me. I went to bed and it was still there. But what I did was, all I could do was just lay down and sit with it, acknowledge it, feel it as much as I can, and then maybe distract myself for a little while and then come back to it, because the more attention you pay to it, the more likely, or actually the faster that it'll start to kind of dissipate. But you kind of have to take a little bit, give a little bit of effort to kind of poke at it a little bit and just kind of let it dissipate a little bit at a time. And I did not sleep well that night because it was still there. So it was very difficult for me to fall asleep. And when I did, I would wake up and then it was there again. It did not leave, know. But my inner resolve just kind of pushed me to just keep working with it. Don't make it an enemy. Don't make that person an enemy. That's very, very important. Because we talk about don't make your ego the enemy, but that was his ego, right? Yeah. So you don't make that person an enemy, and you just kept. And then actually, the middle of the next day, that feeling, which was so strong in me, actually dissipated and like 90% left. And but that was so freaking liberating. I cannot even explain it, beyond this. But I really hope that made sense, everyone. And
well, how about this? Come up with
yeah.
What would you say the solution was to dealing with someone's inflated ego? What was your solution?
Yeah, my solution was dealing with my own ego.
So taking a look inside.
Yeah, taking a look inside.
You guys will notice a very similar pattern. Taking a look inside is crucial to hitting that mark. If you really want to let go, not just saying, oh, whatever, yeah, it doesn't bother me, it's nothing to me. And it really does bother you, or either you're angry or walking with an attitude. If you genuinely want to let go of these issues and get over them, not just hide them under a rug and waiting for another situation to make it blow up again, but to really get over this stuff, really get through it and get beyond it, you gotta go inside. And we're gonna spend time on another podcast to teach a little more about going inside. Right now, we want to move on to the Q&A session of these lovely podcasts of ours. So we got about 5 questions here that we're going to go into.
Keep it short and sweet.
Trying to keep it as short and sweet as possible. We're running,
but we're
30,
flowing.
34 minutes. Yeah.
We're flowing, so we got to go with it.
So, a question, and this is sort of a good segue because we're talking about you got to go inside. Someone might ask, well, what the hell does that mean? How do I go inside?
Yeah.
Well, the key to your journey, let me tell you guys, meditation. Meditation is huge. You're going to hear us talking about meditation a lot, if not every time we speak.
And it's not a new age thing.
No, it is not. It's not some... it's not some mystical voodoo remedy that's going to give you powers to get everything you want and so on and so forth. Don't
use the new age eraser.
Yeah, no,
because it's so easy to use a label and just say it's easy to sweep it under the rug.
Plain and simple, it's not a gimmick. Meditation is an actual tool that can help you in your life. It does have health benefits. The more you use meditation, the better. There are different forms of meditation. Meditation can conjure up, the stereotypical image of a guy sitting with his legs and arms crossed, chanting out, oh, whatever. You like that shit? Chanting something out. And there are some forms of meditation that are like that. That's one of my favorites, a Tibetan bell. I like to use this, and what this does, and this is a good form of meditation, is to cling that together, and then you listen to the sound as it dissipates, and then your thoughts go away with it. It is a very calming, very soothing experience, and not just because it sounds good, but because if you pay attention to it, your thoughts will dissipate to it. Now, that's one form of meditation.
And you'll learn different techniques.
Yeah.
Some techniques will help you for a while, and then at some point you may have to move into something else or create something or add something to that technique, but don't necessarily be at some point where you have to throw it away or say, it doesn't work anymore and I got to do this and that, and don't complicate it.
Exactly. Just like anything, like exercise or any sort of skill, a sport, often you have to, you got to play around with a little bit. You got to try different techniques out, and some may work for a while, or it may not work later on because your ego has sort of gotten used to it, almost like the Borg in Star Trek. If any of you Trekkies out there like the Borg or like Star Trek, but yeah,
Nerd.
I am. But yeah, this is it's really, meditation is one of your greatest tools on your journey. So to go into the Q&A, our first question of the day is,
how can meditation really help me?
So we kind of already, I guess, have answered that.
Yeah, we have. Yep.
It calms your mind down. It stills your thoughts. I mean, we'll go into that one day too, in terms of how, the constant monkey mind, as they call in Zen, is very different from a thought. Having a thought and thinking in your brain is different from that sort of constant chatter that's just nonstop. So we'll go into that, but it can help health, your emotions, your mind.
Yeah,
clarity.
it can aid you in your own career.
Exactly. A lot of things, skills. I mean, all sorts of things.
Definitely.
There's no end to the amount of help that meditation can provide.
Yeah, I mean, it could improve your relationship with anybody.
Oh, yeah.
With anybody.
Oh yeah. So, I guess we'll save that for another episode. I was going to say that relationship is what it's all about, relating, right? That's what a relationship is. It's how you relate to anything on earth. And so, especially when it comes to other people who have their own, things going on, their own identities and egos and reactions, you having control over your reactions will improve that enormously. So next up we have,
how do I live with someone who does not support my spiritual growth?
That's huge. So let's say you live with someone who has a huge ego. It's I mean that can be a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, because they might say that it's just BS, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who, people who you trust and know and love, and you cherish their opinions. They might think your spiritual journey is just some sort of gimmick, some voodoo gimmick that that's a very temporary thing that's not lasting and is not going to bring real results. My advice to that is to, don't feed someone else's neither their ego nor their opinion. Don't fuel your own ego by relentlessly going over, that sort of emotional, anxiety-filled thought about, well, shoot, they said it's bad. Should I really believe in it or not? Don't feed into that. Instead, turn around. You focus on your growth. You let them do theirs.
Yeah, I mean, you could learn a lot about your own ego by observing somebody else's ego, and when you realize that, it's actually less resistance, and it actually might end up freeing them in a way. And they'll see something in you that you never know, might actually blow them away. I'm not a big as far as like trying to change anyone else. Don't try that.
Do not do that.
Yeah, never do that. I've met so many people in relationships, have gotten married, and but they do this or that, or they, who knows, they do something that doesn't really match with your own energy. And, certain people will say, well, I can change them, or, once we're married or whatever, they will change. They're going to go.
Ask anybody ever how that has worked out for them.
Yeah. And actually, in actuality, it exacerbates it.
Oh, yeah.
It makes it worse because then they actually end up resenting.
Yep.
And then you play your part and you just want to punish them for doing that and not changing, So the less resistance you can give that person, and the more observing and being compassionate to that person for recognizing their ego, will definitely help you on your own journey.
Spend your time on you. Now, if someone is inviting you to give them aid, in terms of helping them out with their ego, that's a different situation. But
because teaching can actually does a lot for you.
Oh yeah,
it
can help you out too. So I always find that when I'm teaching a course, my own understanding and improvement on my own path, it doubles because of that. It's a constant reminder, and you're in that zone. So that is always a good avenue. But and then the other thing too, I do want to say this. So, while sometimes someone might change by seeing you change, they might not. And it might be time to go. And that's something that you are ultimately going to have to know by feeling it out and testing your own waters. So that's something.
Yeah, and sometimes somebody you're living with can't actually handle that you're changing.
Yeah.
Right? They can't handle somebody that actually doesn't have an ego, or somebody that doesn't react to their crap.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And there are different forms. That's a good podcast in its own, is the many forms of the ego.
So how long does it take to become enlightened?
That is completely up to you. And again, this, I guess, that said, that's something I want to get on. I think there's kind of this sort of fantasy out there that once you become enlightened, you're in the happy magic candy land of enlightenment, and you're staying there. No, and we talked about this in our first podcast that we see our inspirations like Eckhart Tolle and so on, and they seem to sort of hit this mark where bam, that's it. Well, no, and most of us, by the way, live in a world where we're constantly encountering people, and we have to be in situations where people have strong egos, and that forces our egos to react. Enlightenment is, again, it's a journey. It's not a goal.
Yeah.
It's something that you get on, and you will very likely fluctuate up and down. Your fluctuations may change. You may be in a primary mode of enlightenment for the duration of your life, and then sometimes you may sort of fall beneath. And then as time goes on, the more you put into it, I guarantee you, the more you'll spend time in that enlightened zone, and that is a very, very blissful place to be. So, I mean, I guess that's the answer. It takes as long as you need it to take.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the road. So you might as well just take the scenic route and enjoy it as much as possible. Yeah. It's not a means to an end; it's an end in itself.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess we kind of answered, how do I meditate?
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of answered that. We'll go into on a future episode about some different techniques and give you guys some great advice, and maybe even do a sort of a meditative walkthrough. That might be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of a cool video.
We could definitely do a tutorial on, 1 or 2 or 3 meditation techniques.
That'd be awesome.
And what do you do if you don't have time to meditate? Well, you do have time to meditate.
You do, and I guess that kind of falls into, how do I meditate?
Yeah.
There are many different forms of meditation. I don't do yoga personally. Yoga is not something that I'm just that into. It's cool. I've done it before.
I tried it for 3 months.
This guy tried some Bikram yoga. That's what they heat
that
stuff.
It was so hot. It was actually, once you get used to it, the heat is actually pretty awesome. Yeah. Believe it or not. Okay. I've done some sweat lodges too, and you sit and actually it was my meditation practice from before that actually allowed me to sit into the heat, because getting back to the hot yoga, your first class, they said that if you could just stay in the room the whole time without leaving, that in itself is a feat, And when I got to a point where I couldn't do the poses anymore, and I just laid on my mat, and it was so damn hot in there that I was able to actually stay to the end of class. So I was proud of that at that time.
that was a milestone for you.
Yeah, it kind of was. Yeah. So,
that's cool.
But now I don't anymore.
But back to the question, I suppose, is, what do you do if you don't have time to meditate? Well, there are meditations that can come with, activity as you're doing the activity.
Yeah, it takes a fair amount of awareness to, and it really is, it's quality. It's definitely not quantity, but like my meditation, and I know this doesn't directly answer the question, but my meditation got better when I was able to bring more quality to it.
Yeah.
And that comes to the time thing, right?
Well,
if you can, take 3 breaths or something like that.
Exactly.
When you wake up. But go ahead.
Well, that's almost exactly what I'm talking about, is right when you think you don't have time to meditate, just pay attention to the world around you.
Yeah.
Put your awareness into everything. It could be the color on the wall.
Yeah.
things on the wall. Stay away from words and anything written that might pop an idea into your mind, but focus inside and out. Take a focus on the inside of your body. Feel the warmth coursing through your veins. And that sometimes I've encountered lots of people that have a hard time doing that, and that takes some practice. For some people to sort of get in there and to feel inside of their body, to feel sort of the life that's inside, which is a very possible and very awesome thing to do. You can get some real bliss going on with that kind of meditation.
Yeah, I like one that's super short.
Yeah.
Just listen to yourself breathe.
That's huge. Oh, it's great. Oh, yeah.
It's so short.
Yeah.
But if you do that, don't freak yourself out, but just listen to yourself breathe a little bit.
Well, and the important thing...
we'll get more into that.
To all these meditations is that you're taking energy away from that chatterbox mind state. That's just the monkey mind that's just kind of constantly going on and on and on with itself. That's what any meditation's purpose is.
Yeah, you're putting miles between your head and your body in a way.
So exactly.
Speak.
You're disidentifying from your ego is what you're doing.
Yeah.
When you have the time to take yourself out of your thoughts and be in a place of pure awareness, you will see that there's your thoughts, there's your ego, and then there's you who's paying attention to all of it. And that's how you can see that there's a clear line of separation between the two. So
yeah, I would say that's it for our Q&A.
That's it for the podcast.
Thanks for thank you for listening again. We really so appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
This means so much to us, but we really hope it means a lot to you too.
Yeah, this is something I think the world needs a lot more of, and we want to be able to share this. And
if you want to do it, just ask us for advice. We'll help you to.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll definitely guide you on how you could do this too.
Absolutely.
Because we need as many leaders out there doing this as possible, and that's the only way that things are going to change in a more accelerated rate.
We have to spread this kind of mentality because the world, as we can easily take a look out and see, it's in a really screwed up place. Yeah. And to help us do that, please remember to leave us feedback below and like and subscribe. Also, hit this button to get notifications. There's a big chime going on right now.
Yep, it's an actual bell. And please share this video.
Sharing is caring, folks. That's it for today.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you're wearing a headset.
Yeah, that was kind of loud. We didn't give you much.
Okay, peace, everyone.
Take it easy. Peace out, folks. Peace out.